Hey, hello, and welcome back to How to Feel Like a Midlife Goddess. Today, I've got such a special guest with me, my dear friend and acupuncturist, Amanda Odie. I've been seeing Amanda for years now, and she has helped me so much, so I'm really excited to share her wisdom with you. In our chat, we talk about acupuncture and the wider world of Chinese medicine and how it can support women through midlife. Amanda explains yin and yang in a way that really makes sense. We get into how these principles link with hormones, hot flushes, dryness, energy levels, even weight changes. What I love about this conversation is how practical it is. Amanda shares tips on food, lifestyle, and little adjustments you can make straight away to feel more balanced, whether you're running too hot, too cold, too dry, or too damp. So if you're curious about acupuncture or simply want a fresh way of looking at midlife, you're going to find this one fascinating. So here's our conversation. So I am sitting here today with Amanda Odie, who is an acupuncturist, and we are discussing how midlife women can really be helped by acupuncture and all the various things that you can do, not just with in a treatment session, but also what you can do with foods. So welcome to the podcast, Amanda.
Hi. So I'd like to talk a bit more about Chinese medicine because it's much wider than acupuncture. So Chinese medicine has 5 arms. There's acupuncture, there's food, there's herbs, there's Tuina, which is push-pull for massage, and there's also Qigong.
That's so interesting because most of us think of acupuncture as just you go into, you lay on a bed and you have needles, put in you. And yeah. I mean, I've been having acupuncture with Amanda for, how many years?
A lot.
A lot of years. Probably, I think probably since about 2010 or something. So probably like 15 years.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And I have it because I like the fact that, you put the pins in and it does something to my energy. I'm not really sure. So that's why I'm so pleased to have you on the podcast so you can explain to us. But it's basically you help my energy channels. So that's how I understand acupuncture. But then when I'm talking to you, I know that you're, have so much knowledge about food and how that can really impact us and how Chinese medicine can influence our health just by, what we eat and what we put in our bodies. Can you speak to us a bit more about that as well?
Sure. So acupuncture and Chinese medicine is based on the principles of yin and yang. Yin is the character for yin is represented by the shady side of a mountain, and yang is represented by the sunny side of a mountain. And so if you want to liken these characters to characteristics in people, the yang is your heating element, your fire. The yin is your cooling element, your water. So as we approach middle age, your yin typically declines and so does your yang, but women typically have more yin. And it is said by the time that a woman gets to 40, they've lost half of their yin. If you imagine if yin is your water and coolant, if you've lost that, then oftentimes, as we know, when you get to menopause, you get too dry. But you get other things like you're too hot, you experience hot flushes and lots of dryness. But there are other patterns as well. So you can actually get too much yang, which would be the classic, people have just become quite big around their waist. They put on that sort of weight and they become more waterlogged. So that would be a yang pattern.
Can I just ask, so can you describe to us, if we're more yin, what symptoms would we be experiencing?
Right, so if you're more yin deficient, you'll experience more dry problems. So you might have dry skin, dry hair, vaginal dryness. You might have more hot flushes, that kind of stuff.
So that's quite a common pattern, isn't it?
Absolutely.
In midlife women. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Typically, people are yin deficient, but also yang deficient. And then there's another factor called qi, which is your energy generally, and that can get stuck as well. So then people can have yin deficiency and yang deficiency and qi stuckness, which we call qi stagnation.
Okay, gosh. So if I'm yin deficient, I'm kind of dry, I've got dry hair, dry skin, all the dries. I'm experiencing them. And if I'm yang deficient, what symptoms might I?
So you might be prone to weight gain. You might
Right.
be having much more tiredness, fatigue, that kind of stuff. And you might actually feel quite cold.
Yeah.
So some women in menopause actually also get quite cold too. I mean, generally we know in scientific terms that our thermoregulation is impaired.
Yes, yeah. So it can go one way, hot or
Yeah.
but but some people will feel colder.
Mm-hmm.
Although is that less common? Do you see that?
I'd say less commonly, but I think classically lots of women tend to put on weight.
Yes, yeah. And I would describe that, through my nutrition sort of brain and understanding, estrogen and progesterone as they drop off these symptoms.
Sure.
You get hotter, and I would say, if somebody comes in and they've got, hot flushes, dry skin, dry eyes, dry hair, all the symptoms, and then weight gain, I would be describing it as like a blood sugar imbalance. We're not so sensitive to insulin. We're losing our estrogen, progesterone. But in Chinese medicine,
So you can use Chinese medicine as a framework to understand the hormone differences as well. So, for instance, if you want to look at yin could pertain more to estrogen and yang can pertain more to progesterone and testosterone. And if you think about what progesterone does, as we know medically, it's thermogenic, so it will raise your temperature. So you can kind of start to see that there's hot and cold within somebody. And if you look before somebody hits menopause, you've got a biphasic pattern in their cycle. So when the estrogen is high in the first part of the cycle, in the follicular phase, you've got a roughly a temperature of 36.2, and it will be elevated in the luteal phase to about 36.7. So you have a plus 0.4, 0.5 degrees elevation. And when you start losing the estrogen, well, progesterone first, actually, you start seeing coldness, but you can also have a lot of heat as well. So it just depends what that person is like to start with. So if somebody is already too hot, I mean, Chinese medicine, we talk a lot about, the old books talk about whether someone's too hot, too cold, too dry, or too wet. So out of these principles, somebody might have been running too hot all of their life. So if they'd been tracking their basal body temperatures, they might have been elevated. So instead of being at 36.2, they might have been averaging about 36.5. Those women can often hit menopause and be quite hot, whereas the women who were colder then will hit menopause and be colder. So the former would be more yin deficient and the latter would be more yang deficient.
But presumably that's quite hard to know whether you're in. I mean, it's hard to know if you're one or the other because they're quite small differences, aren't they? Yes. Obviously you can tell, but if I was someone listening and I'm thinking, oh, am I yin deficient? What can I do? Or am I yang deficient? How will we be able to differentiate as to which one we are?
Very symptom-led.
Oh, okay.
If, for instance, somebody is running too hot, then the old Chinese books would say, where there's too much heat, make it cold. So there's very simple ways you can do that with your food. So
can I just interrupt 1 second, darling, just to say, and I'm calling Amanda darling because I know her so well. She's a dear friend as well. But I've been seeing you, and just to make this real for listeners, what am I? Am I too dry, too hot? What can you remember what I am? So yin deficient, yang deficient?
So I'd say because women have, by the time they get to 40, they've lost half of their yin. So we're pretty much everybody's going to lose yin deficient. Yeah, but they're also yang deficient as well. It's the nature of what happens as we age.
Yeah,
it's just some people will hit menopause with more yin deficiency than others, and some people will hit menopause with more yang deficiency than others.
Yeah.
And then some people might be more stuck than others. So it's just everybody's individual. And they're individual at a particular time of their life. So you treat the symptoms rather than the general. So if somebody's running too hot, there's a bunch of things. I actually work at a cancer charity as well. And so I help treat women just with acupuncture, but for hot flushes due to cancer treatment. And I always say to them, if they want to make their hot flushes worse, which of course they don't, but if they wanted to, they would have a lamb curry with some red wine and some really sugary pudding, and then with a coffee, because all of those ingredients actually elevate your heat. And so conversely, if they wanted to cool their flushes down, they would avoid all caffeine, which I'm sure is what you would say as well. But caffeine is very heating. The only really useful caffeinated drink that's cooling in Chinese medicine is green tea. So you can get away with drinking caffeine, but you have to drink it as green tea. But things like mint tea, which traditionally, throughout, I don't know, lots of parts of the world, they drink in very hot places, actually cools you down. So that's very useful.
So if we want to be cooler, green tea and mint tea.
Yes, as drinks, rather than coffee. And coffee, even if you had it cold, iced coffee, it's still very heating because. So there's an idea in Chinese that there's an energy within the food, inherent within the food, and it doesn't matter whether you cook it or not. So even if you try to flame grill a cucumber, it's still cooling, whereas steak is always heating. So if you've got somebody too hot, you would try to avoid lots of the red meats, and lamb is particularly heating.
So would you say, so I'm presumably yin deficient?
Yeah.
So for me and women that are listening like me that are, have lost half their yin, as we kind of do. And even if you take hormones, you're on HRT, you're still yin deficient, or how does that kind of
it will mitigate some of the stuff. And then that's why women take HRT, because it stops hot flushes.
Yeah.
And it increases, sometimes if you're doing it vaginally, it'll increase lubrication. So it stops dryness.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Okay. So absolutely, there is a crossover there.
For sure.
So if I'm listening and I'm thinking, I want to do, I feel, like I could, I've got drier skin, drier hair, maybe vaginal issues or whatever. What can I do to, replace some of that yin or to help with the yin through my diet?
Right.
Or lifestyle?
I think so. So, well, definitely with the diet. So you want to avoid things like red meat, especially lamb and beef, but actually you can eat duck. That's very cooling.
And that's really interesting. Yeah. So why you think about sort of having duck in a Chinese restaurant, don't you?
But if you ever buy a duck and you cook it, it's very fatty.
Yes. Okay.
And the fat is the grease. Is the yin.
Yeah. So though you said earlier, very unctuous.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
okay.
That's
and that cools you.
Yes, okay. but it also lubricates you.
Okay, yeah.
So it's not necessarily that it's so cooling, but it's very lubricating.
Okay.
And if you compare duck with chicken, you don't get anywhere near as much fat from cooking a chicken as you would a duck. That's the difference. And likewise with pork, that's quite cooling too. And then cooking with the bones of these things is very, very helpful too, for our bones too.
It is, yeah. Can you elaborate?
So in Chinese medicine, there is a concept of marrow, which we have in Western medicine, but it's talking about the essence of the animal. And if you cook it for a long time, as you would probably tell your clients, that it releases collagen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think Chinese medicine would say that collagen is yin.
Okay.
If you increase your collagen, you're going to increase your yin. So you probably tell people to take collagen powders and boil bones.
Yes.
For reasons that I would do the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
So there's lots of crossover.
Yeah.
Really fascinating.
Yeah. So pork and duck
and oysters. But
oysters, yeah, okay. They've got lots of zinc.
But not, obviously, I know you can't eat 15 oysters a day, but actually that would be really good for your yin if you could.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Any other foods? I think we were talking earlier, you mentioned goji berries.
So goji berries are an interesting thing because they are herbal, but they're in this category where they're herbal and culinary. So there are lots of herbs in Chinese medicine that are just medicinal, but goji berries and dates would be in the culinary category. So you can cook with them, but they also are very medicinal.
Okay.
But you have to be careful with goji berries because they're very sticky. And so they in Chinese medicine, we call them cloying. So if you were to eat a handful of those just by themselves, they absorb a lot of water, don't they? But they're very sticky. They're very sugary. So if you've got a sensitive digestion, your stomach qi isn't very strong, then you can cause a lot of bloating if you start eating handfuls of them every day.
Yeah, and a lot of us do get the message that maybe goji berries are good for us. So a little bit of goji berry is good, so therefore a lot must be good. And it's not necessary.
It's not true. And actually, if you're going to...
I've done that many times.
have goji berries, you're really best to have them in boiling water and soak them.
Yeah.
And then drink them as a tea.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I make this lovely, I put it on my Instagram. It's this lovely Asian mix where you put in, I think it's 2 tablespoons of pistachios, 2 tablespoons of flaxseed, 2 tablespoons of pumpkin seeds, and then some black sesame seeds, and I think the same of goji berries, and you mix them all up, and it's got a sweetness, but it's got an earthiness to it. And I use that like on toppings for yogurt. So you put all those ingredients in a pan, you gently heat them, and then you grind them in a blender or whatever. But it's quite addictive, but it tastes so lovely. And it's a mix that they use in Asia for all sorts of, like, for hair, for skin.
Well, so
do you know anything about that?
So goji berries are very famous in Asia for tonifying the blood. So we didn't even talk about that, but that's another aspect of menopause.
We can get back to that. Okay.
And linseeds are very famous in Chinese medicine. They're actually in the material.
And even flax seeds are the same thing.
Yeah, that's right. And they are very famous for being a yin tonic. And so when you look scientifically at what linseeds contain, they contain a lot of phytoestrogens. So it's kind of, there are always these bridges that you can build between what the science says and what Chinese medicine says in the old books. But, it's estrogen. It's actually phytoestrogen.
Yeah.
So it's very famous for, if you ever have got ground linseeds and you soak them, they swell up.
Yes, yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about yin. It's lubricating, it's watery, it's slippery.
Yeah.
And that's what women lose.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's what you're trying to put back in with your food. I mean, yeah, sure, you can take supplements but it's like we have to all eat every day. So you might as well try and get as much slippery stuff back in our diet and fatty stuff that is also somewhat cooling.
Yeah. So what other, like, if we're thinking of vegetables, or what vegetables would give us more yin?
Pretty much all of the vegetables are kind of cooling. So, and they're watery usually as well. So that's, they're not necessarily a yin tonic, but they're you just should, we should always include them. There are some particular, so in Chinese medicine, there's also this idea of organs, as indeed there is in Western medicine. So, but particular things go to particular organs. So, for instance, if you've got say if you had COVID and you had a really bad chest infection, and then you had a really dry cough afterwards, what do you want to do? For dry, you want to make it wet. So you want to put moisture back in your lungs, and a thing that's really good for that is pears.
Ah, pears. Yum.
So they're very watery.
Yes, yeah.
So they're very helpful for your lung energy, but I'm not talking about lungs here.
We're not, but all these foods are good to eat on a weekly basis for most women that are listening to this, because majority of us are yin deficient.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're yang deficient and you're too watery, then you want to be putting in some warmer stuff. So you may be wanting to do that, put in some more red meat, or you're wanting to put in some spicy food. Or, it's okay then to drink a bit of alcohol for those people who are a bit cold, but a tiny bit, a medicinal bit. Chinese medicine has a lot to say about alcohol.
Yeah, so that's interesting. What does it have to say about alcohol?
So if you're talking on a scale, the beer and cider are the least heating, and then white wine is the next one. Red wine is more heating, and then Chinese medicine, actually, spirits are called fire water. So if you really,
when you say spirits, you mean like vodka and gin and
yeah. So if you really want to get hot, then you drink.
Yeah.
And actually, we all know that if we have a spirit, we do quite.
I mean, I know since I've been in midlife. Sorry to bore all the poor listeners because they've heard this a million times before, but just this heat when you drink, it's never used to be there, but you just get hotter. Hey, just a quick pause to let you know that if you're navigating midlife and beyond, maybe feeling a bit flat or fed up with food, I've got 2 things that could really help. Firstly, did you know that I coach women through the Metabolic Balance Program? So if you're ready for something more personalised, this program is all about resetting your metabolism, supporting your hormones, and giving you a plan that actually fits your life. It helps you discover which foods suit you best, helps you manage portion control and satiety, and build healthy habits that last, whatever age you are. Want to know if it's right for you? Well, we can have a quick chat. You can book a free 30-minute call with me and we'll decide together. Secondly, My book, Feel Good for Menopause, is packed with real-life tips, simple shifts, hormone-friendly guidance, and plenty of delicious recipes to help you feel more like yourself again. So if you just need that bit of inspiration, do get yourself a copy. It's available on Amazon, or you can click the link in the show notes. Okay, let's get back to the podcast. So you talked a lot about like fatty meats, duck and pork, and also red meats if you're a bit yang deficient, you're too watery. And I'm thinking, oh, cholesterol, midlife women got to be a bit careful with cholesterol. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think everything in balance, and that's probably what you would say. I mean, don't do too much of anything. I mean, and eat a rainbow and eat lots and lots of diversity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you guys say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what about fish? Where does fish?
So some fish, prawns are very heating, actually. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting because in Western medicine, we know that prawns can cause a lot of allergies.
Yeah. I mean, some people won't eat prawns. They'll say, oh, they're bottom feeders and, did you eat all the crap? Therefore, what's your opinion on prawns?
Well, I mean, everywhere's polluted now, right?
Yeah.
I think, in the olden days, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be careful, probably. I mean, like tuna, but
it's all right once a week.
Yeah,
you're talking about the mercury levels. If you have tuna more than once or twice a week, you might be getting more mercury because tuna are such big fish.
Yeah, and
they bioaccumulate mercury because they eat all the little fish that've got a little bit of mercury in them, and then they suddenly, they've got they're bigger fish, so therefore they've all the little fish, and in their flesh you get high levels of mercury.
Yeah, and different if they're bigger fish, they live deeper down.
Yeah,
they get more, but heavy metals.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's not really Chinese medicine. I mean, in the olden days, fish, prawns are definitely heating, so best avoid those if you're yin deficient. But then you've got the white fishes, and then they're pretty neutral. But something like salmon is actually quite greasy.
Yes,
and I think that's what the nutritionists would say.
Yeah,
it's actually rich in omega-3.
Yes,
and so that stuff is slippery and lubricating.
Yes,
again.
Yeah.
So that's how you can kind of.
So we're going to keep eating the oily fish, guys, which we love.
Yes.
The sort of salmon and mackerel, and sardines, herring, trout, all of that, yeah. Anything else that you'd add to diet? I mean, I know your diet, Amanda, is very natural, but you like a roast, don't you, on a Sunday? You always do your chicken or something roasted. Amanda used to grow. She's in the middle of moving at the moment, but you used to grow all your own vegetables.
A lot of them.
Well, a lot of them, yeah. And I would say your diet's quite balanced, but you do kind of prioritize food that, the origin.
I think there's always room for improvement for all of us, right? But I think it's best to try to eat food that's grown locally and seasonally. And I think that's what Chinese medicine is very good at saying. You kind of eat stuff in season. So, I mean, there's obviously times of the year where you cannot get so much food, but it's probably not best. I mean, we all love bananas, we all love oranges, but it's, this stuff is, for instance, bananas are very dampening. So if somebody's quite sluggish and have got slow digestion, and they're also maybe quite, like watery, sludgy, bananas aren't that great. So you've just got to be careful with what you've got, what your particular presentation is, and then match the food according to that. Having said that, one banana a day is probably going to be fine, but, they come from a hot place, and actually they're quite cooling and quite, well, as you would say, very sweet. So you don't want to eat a load of them.
No, yeah. But berries, berries good?
So berries are usually very good. And I think you guys would say they don't, like if you're talking about glycemic index, it's low. Berries are, as we know in Western medicine, rich in, all sorts of antioxidants and that sort of stuff. But in Chinese medicine, they're very helpful for yin. For sure.
Yeah. And going back to the goji berries, do you think it's a good idea for most of us to have some goji berries in our diet then?
Well, so in China, they would typically drink goji berries in hot water. And you can eat it when it's swollen, but you wouldn't eat loads of them. And classically, they have it with chrysanthemum flowers, and it's very good for you, nourishing your what we call liver blood, which is actually very good for your eyes. So if you have dry eyes, which a lot of women do in menopause and postmenopausally, it's actually very lubricating. They're quite slippery, goji berries.
Yes, yeah.
So it's that kind of thing that you're trying to tend to.
Yes, yeah.
To increase the wetness and the slipperiness.
Yeah. Interesting. So interesting. So any other headlines when it comes to food that we haven't included before we move on from that topic?
Well, so I think, quite often something like a bone vinegar is very, very helpful. So a vinegar that you use, I classically give people about 5-6 Chinese herbs to soak in apple cider vinegar and then put a load of vegetables in, say like kale or parsley, nettles if they're doing it in springtime. And a tablespoon of that in a bit of water every day is really helpful for probably about 500 milligrams of calcium.
Yeah. So thinking about bone health, basically.
Yes, yeah.
Because we do lose bone. Most of us lose bone as we get older, and we have to work quite hard to keep it, maintain it. Yeah. So stop it going down too quickly, basically, because it does. Yeah, we do lose it, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And so there's a lot of Chinese herbs which are not medicinal, which are actually not culinary, which are just medicinal. I mean, you wouldn't really want to drink them like for culinary purposes because they taste quite strong, but they are actually very useful at strengthening your bones.
Yeah. So do you believe that we can maintain our bone mass if we're quite sort of proactive?
Well, as you and I know, it's much more than just your diet. You need to do a lot of exercise.
Yes.
Stress
the bones
and also not have so much stress in your life because that cortisol will from a Western perspective that antagonizes insulin or all sorts of but causes havoc with your bones.
Yes, yeah, and alcohol as well. Too much alcohol is also So this bone, what would you call this bone
vinegar?
Bone vinegar. Yeah, I've made this before, and maybe I could put the recipe in the show notes. But basically, can you describe that once more? So you get apple cider vinegar.
So and I typically give my clients about 5 different Chinese herbs, and then you put those in the bottom of a Kilner jar, and then you put greens in. So if it's in springtime, fresh nettle tops because they're rich in iron.
They're rich in iron.
And vinegar is very useful at extracting minerals. So that's the means by which you're increasing your calcium. So there's lots of vegetables and also my herbs that they're quite rich in calcium, but there's also other minerals that are really useful for bone builders, like silica, which is in horsetail, for instance.
Yeah, and I remember that book. Amanda gave me a book about, I can't remember what it's called now, but years ago we had that book and it was, you recommended it, was for bone health and it's got this recipe in there. Don't remember it just being Chinese herbs. Was there something else in there? Because if somebody's listening and they're thinking, oh, I want to make that, it didn't have your Chinese herbs in it. It had something else in it because it was just a recipe that anyone could get.
I think most of them were Chinese herbs, but
you can get them.
Yeah, they're available probably from somewhere like Baldwin's online.
Yeah. So basically, if people are interested and they want to make this, I will put the recipe in the show notes. It's basically a drink that you have. Did you say a couple of tablespoons a day?
Just a tablespoon mixed in water.
Mixed in water.
Yeah,
and that's going to give you about half the amount or 1/3 of the amount of calcium you need on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it is quite hard to get. We need about 1,300 milligrams of calcium a day, postmenopausal or perimenopausal, whatever. I mean, it's hard to, I look at people's diaries and think, you're not getting it. And a lot of people aren't doing dairy these days. I mean, what's your opinion on dairy?
So in Chinese medicine, dairy is very dampening. So actually, if somebody's classically very dry, dairy is pretty useful because it's slippery.
Yeah.
And if you think of yogurt, it's slippery and it's wet, and so there's a heaviness to cheese as well. So if somebody's quite dry, then it's greasy. So that's quite useful for some people, but maybe not for the people that have put on lots of weight because they're also yang deficient as well. So they have a mixed pattern of yin deficiency and yang deficiency.
Okay, yeah. Can you tell? So, before I go into that, let's just go back to the dairy a second. So, again, we think cheese, high in saturated fat. Greek yogurt seems to be having a moment at the moment. because everyone's talking about, it's got, good levels of protein in it. But do you think, that eating lots of cheese and eating lots of Greek yogurt is perfectly all right, and butter? What's your opinion on butter?
I think so. They're probably in the neutral zone when it comes to whether they are hot or cold. So it's not too bad to eat them if you're too hot. They're not super cooling, but they're neutral. So I think, if somebody's very dry, they're very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think dairy kind of went out of fashion, and a lot of people were doing dairy free. And now I think with things like kefir and yogurt getting talked about quite a lot, I'm finding people that are quite enjoying going back to dairy. I do see some people that just do not get on with it. They do struggle. I'm sure you must see people. Some people just
absolutely,
just don't get on with dairy. But if you don't have a problem with it, it's quite useful.
It's quite useful, and I think that dairies, especially cheese is all of the dairy though is quite heavy, and so if some women are very anxious, it's actually a heavy food, and it's really helpful for that anxiety.
Is it? That's really interesting. Yeah.
But in our old, kind of ideas, we'd say, have a cup of warm milk for bed to calm you down.
Yeah.
No, it's to do with that.
Yeah.
Who eats, what's milk for babies?
Yeah.
It's nourishing.
Yes. Yeah.
I think having said that, it's always about balance. And in China, there's not a load of dairy. So, people would probably eat, instead of having an ice cream, I don't recommend ice cream at all because that's frozen. Maybe if it's 40 degrees, but it's very, very cooling. So typically in China, there's not a big this idea with everything's like ice in drinks, for instance. It just kills your digestion. And
that's interesting. Ice kills your digestion because you want the heat and
you need the pot to cook stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Sometimes that pot's too hot and you have all sorts of gastro problems like gastritis or reflux and stuff, but maybe those people want to cool stuff down, and that's why we put in kind of milk and it calms the tummy down. But if you're putting too much ice into somebody, then you're really going to interfere with their digestive enzymes and just thermally it's we need to be a certain temperature to actually cook our food.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know you said to me that when I can run a bit cold, my temperature can be quite cool, and and I often feel cold. And you said to me, I need more like warming spices and hot food, shouldn't eat cold food. And I find that's really helpful. Like if I have breakfast and it's got, a bit of heat in it, whether that comes from ginger or some chili on an egg or something like that. I've been making this lovely breakfast where you have like a flatbread, and then I add some hummus, a layer of hummus to that. And then I add some harissa paste.
Lovely.
Yeah. And then I might add, some greens, like a handful of rocket, maybe some cherry tomatoes, and then I put an egg on the top or 2 eggs. It's so yummy. And it's kind of like, it's got that heat and it's got, protein from the eggs and from the hummus. And I feel like that keeps me going for like hours, and I just feel a bit warmer on that. Whereas sometimes I'll have a smoothie and I try and get my fruit in the smoothie that hasn't been frozen, because it's really brilliant in the summer having like cold berries in your freezer. And then, I make my smoothie and I might throw a handful of berries in. And even on a hot day, I think, I'm feeling a bit chilly. So I really sense that it really cools me down.
So it depends on the nature of the person. So if somebody's running too hot generally, they can probably get away with drinking something, with frozen berries in, just about. But in Chinese medicine, your height of your digestive fire is between 7 and 11 in the morning. So if you're putting cold stuff on the fire, like any fire, if you put cold water on a fire, you're going to put the fire out. You need a certain amount of fire to cook your food. So I wouldn't recommend that people drink anything really. Especially if they run cold, I'd say really avoid anything from the fridge, straight from the fridge, and avoid definitely never have anything frozen, especially ice.
Yeah, gosh, that's interesting. I've never seen you have an icy drink now, come to think of it.
No.
You're not a big ice cream person either, are you?
I run a bit cold, and if I were somewhere, I don't know, in 40 degrees, then I might be tempted to an ice cream, but it would have to be really hot.
Yeah.
Another thing in Chinese medicine is that people tend to eat, really advocate eating seasonally. in terms of temperature. So, if it's the depths of winter, you eat soup. You eat like the proper hot food. And so, sometimes I have clients come to me and they're saying they want to lose weight. And it turns out they're eating salads in the middle of winter. And so in Chinese medicine, I would really say avoid eating raw food. You need to eat cooked food, especially for the people that are running cold. If people are running really hot, then maybe they can get away with a bit of salad, but in the winter. But generally, I'd say don't eat too much raw food in the winter.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've had people as well that have sort of done the metabolic balance with me, and they get a list of vegetables that they can have, and they've embraced it brilliantly, and they've followed the plan, and they come in and they go, oh, I've had quite a lot of stomach aches. And I'm like, what have you been eating? And they've been eating like a lot of raw carrot or, raw, I don't know, not raw broccoli or, things like that. They're just quite hard to digest, and they're cold and they're uncooked, and it's just too overwhelming.
So it's not a surprise in a lot of Asian, cuisines, you would put something like ginger in to mitigate some of that coldness. So for instance, when you have sushi, which is cold, you would put horseradish with it and pickled ginger, because it offsets that cold.
That's fascinating.
And so you see this time and time again, that things are paired to offset or mitigate that hot and cold stuff. So I always say to my clients, if there's too much heat, make it cold. If there's too much cold, make it hot. If it's too wet, try and make it drier. And if it's too dry, try and make it wetter.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you touched a little bit on anxiety. What would you, if someone comes in and they're feeling, and I've suffered with it myself, but if you are feeling a bit anxious, and that it can be quite a common symptom, can't it, in midlife, as estrogen goes down and you just don't quite feel as chill as maybe you once did, and you get a bit overwhelmed. How would you approach that?
So if you can imagine, one of those kettles that you can see through, when you switch it on and you first put the water in, it's still. But when you switch on and you apply heat to it, you're going to start seeing the water being agitated, and it starts bubbling, rising, and eventually, obviously, that boils, turns to steam. And so the same with us. Anxiety is not cold, it's warm. And the more anxious you are, probably the more heat there is in the system. So you want to have somebody try to cool that heat. And so that's not putting coffee in. It's not putting loads of alcohol in. It would be putting, like I said earlier, green tea in. That will be, and I think you guys would talk about L-theanine in that.
Exactly, yeah. Calming amino acid, yeah.
So there's kind of lots of these crossovers once you look at the old wisdom versus the new science.
Yeah, there is so much crossover. And of course, Chinese medicine is like how old? Like 4,000 years old?
Well, it has a recorded history of 2,000 years.
Oh, 2,000, okay. Yeah. But that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, acupuncture is, we've talked a lot about foods, but the actual, act of giving acupuncture, I mean, you see a lot of women, don't you?
Yes.
And, they come back month after month because, they feel so much better from seeing you. Can you explain why somebody might want to, explore acupuncture as a way of helping them through the transition, or even just keeping them healthy as they get older? I me, I come along sort of every 4 to 5 weeks, and I see it as maintenance that I have my acupuncture with you. I'm not really sure exactly what it does, but I just, I totally trust in you. And I know, I talked earlier about very sort of uneloquently about how, it moves energies and it clears things in your body. But that, can you explain to me what acupuncture actually does for people?
So there's this idea that there's energy that runs through people's bodies. But it's called qi in Chinese medicine. Other cultures, so in India, it's known as prana, but Chinese medicine talks about it as qi. And it flows in channels throughout the day in different channels. And these channels can get blocked. And by putting needles in particular places, you can unblock the flow. So there's a very famous old saying, where there's no movement, there's pain. So, classically, people would present to an acupuncturist for treatment for pain, any sorts of pain. So be that musculoskeletal, be it period pain, be it migraines, that kind of thing. And usually there's a stuckness associated with that. So sticking a needle in will promote or elicit some sort of movement to reduce the pain and create flow. How that can work in terms of helping with midlife stuff is that a lot of times things get stuck, but also you can balance people's, to a certain degree, you can balance people's yin and yang. I mean, I think that really food and herbs is the way to strengthen somebody, but acupuncture is somewhat helpful with that.
Yeah, and there are quite a lot of papers, aren't there, to show how efficacious acupuncture is for hot flushes, for example.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I work at a cancer charity that treats where I treat.
Is that Adam Brooks?
Yeah,
in Cambridge. Yeah,
where we treat women with hot flushes because of breast cancer treatments, or men with hot flushes because of anti-androgen therapy for prostate cancer. So both of these groups have their hormones interfered with, and that's when you see extreme hot flushes.
Yeah, really fascinating. Wow, Amanda. Well, that's been a really fascinating conversation, and I reckon I know more now about acupuncture because I normally come and have my treatment. And let me tell you, Amanda sees about 7 or 8 people every day of the week, and she's been doing that for I don't know how many years. 25 years. She's a very, very busy acupuncturist, and that's because she's so good at what she does. But Amanda, just to finish up, if somebody's listening and you've given lots of information that we can start using in our everyday lives, but what couple of standout pieces of advice would you give someone in midlife who's listening, might be struggling a bit, to help them through your sort of Chinese medicine lens?
Well, I think actually it'd probably be the same as the advice you'd give, balance, and try to eat as much a variety as you can, eat a rainbow. And, if you're too hot, then look at the food you're eating and try to eliminate that. And if you're too cold, try and put warming stuff in.
And if you want to know more about Amanda, or you'd like a session with Amanda yourself, if she can fit you in, which I can't promise you because she's quite busy, but I will leave Amanda's details in the show notes. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks, Amanda.
Pleasure.
Thank you for your company. You can hear a new episode of Feel Like a Midlife Goddess every Friday. I know there are so many podcasts out there, so my promise to you is no nonsense, practical advice that adds real value to your life. So if you enjoyed this episode, you know the drill. Now, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, follow, or click subscribe, or even send it to someone who might benefit from this information. It truly helps me grow the podcast and keeps me going. And if you'd like to know more about my own personal approach to food, HRT, movement, stress, and self-connection, my book is available in paperback. I'd also love to hear from you, so don't hesitate to leave a comment or get in touch. And that just leaves me to say I am sending lots of love and light from my midlife goddess to yours.